everybody. Welcome to our final chapel message of December. How was everyone's Christmas? I can't hear you, but I hope it was good. Today, we have Frank Brazell, our Dean of Enrollment Management here at Manny University. Frank is here talking about desperation and brings to life some examples from the Bible and how we can relate them to us today. Let's check it out.
Where do we go when we lose hope? How do we typically behave? What is there to do when all solutions seem to escape us, when we're unable to help ourselves, or even to get help from others on whom we normally depend? Today we're going to talk about this idea of desperation with 3 specific examples from the Gospel of Mark, chapters 5 and 7, in which we see 3 people who've come to the end of their rope, who throw themselves at the feet of Jesus in desperation. First, in Mark 5, we're introduced to Jairus, one of the leaders of the local synagogue. He's confronted with a situation no parent wishes to face. His child is dying. There's a large crowd gathered around Jesus near the Sea of Galilee. Jesus has just returned from his encounter with the demoniac and legion in the region of the Gerasenes. And Mark tells us that when Jairus sees Jesus at the edge of the lake here, he falls at his feet. Here, the Greek word for falls at his feet is pipto. And the imagery of this word is key. Jairus isn't kneeling in reverence like the demoniac did shortly before, but he's outright falling down at the feet of Jesus in his state of desperation, without regard to his status or his dignity. So in the human sense, it's easier for those that have children to imagine the level of stress Jairus might have been feeling to just fall down at the feet of Jesus in his desperation. Jesus does agree to go with Jairus to heal his daughter, but before he can take care of this, another desperate individual interjects herself into the narrative. We're introduced to a woman who's been subject to a hemorrhage for 12 years, which according to the law in Leviticus 15:25 would make her ritually unclean. And she's been treated by doctors without success, spending everything she had only for the problem to grow worse. So when we talk about this passage, the emphasis is often on the faith of this woman, who said that if she could only touch his clothes, not even Jesus himself, then she would be healed. Of course, she does manage to touch his clothes, and she is healed. But after her anonymous healing, Jesus demands to know who touched him. Now, a ritually unclean woman has just touched a rabbi, a teacher, someone who could perform miracles. Under Levitical law, whatever touched a ritually unclean woman would be rendered unclean itself. And as a Jewish woman living in Palestine in the 1st century, who had experienced this shame of ritual uncleanness for more than a decade, I would say that she knew that touching Jesus would make him ritually unclean. Though it's not made explicit in the text. But she's desperate. She's had this hemorrhage for 12 years. She's at the end of her rope, and no solution has thus far worked. She just wants to be healed. And so when Jesus calls her out, she knows she has, according to the law, made this rabbi ritually unclean. And that's why she's trembling with fear when she throws herself at Jesus' feet. The word here is more intense than the pipto action with Jairus. It's prospipto, the throwing of oneself against or upon something. She's throwing herself before Jesus to confess what she's done. But Jesus doesn't mention ritual uncleanness. Rather, he declares her clean, as only the priest could do in the Levitical system. She then leaves, still very much healed and very much freed. After everything that she tried for years had failed to work, she desperately went to the one person who could heal her for good, who could end her shame, who could allow her back into the community, and who could make her clean. From here, Jesus continues on to raise Jairus' daughter, and the similarly desperate father's hope has been granted. But elsewhere in the Gospel of Mark, in chapter 7, we see another parent who, without any other options, comes to throw herself at Jesus' feet for the healing of her daughter from demonic possession. In Mark 7:25, we're introduced to an unnamed Gentile woman, a Syrophoenician, who immediately, Mark likes to use the word immediately, goes to Jesus as soon as she hears about him and throws herself at Jesus' feet in desperation. Again, the word here is prospipto, this more aggressive expression of throwing oneself down. Here we've got a mother that even when she was told by Jesus that he's come first for the Jews, she pushes further because she's desperate to save her child. And she gives Jesus a reply for which he says, "I'm going to heal your daughter." He heals her daughter without even leaving the house in which he was staying. So my question when we started today was, where do we go when we lose hope? Where do we turn when there's nothing working? When our child is sick, when we have a crisis of health, or when we lose our job, and when nothing seems to be working? When we can't seem to overcome the adversity or the crisis that has got us at the end of our rope, we need to throw ourselves at the feet of Jesus. I'll never forget the beginning of the process of buying my first house. We just started renting a home from a church staff member, and it was the best house I'd ever lived in. It was the most at home, the most comforted I'd ever felt anywhere. But after just 2 months of living in the house, my landlord came to me clearly grieved and let me know that for financial reasons, he was gonna have to sell the property. For a moment, my world was shattered. I couldn't buy the house from him, but I also didn't want to have to move twice in the span of a few months. This perfect place that God had provided was gonna be gone. In desperation, I did the only thing I could do. I went up to my office here at Manna University, I shut the door, I got on my knees and prayed. After more than a year of patience from my landlord, and of course the favor of God, I was able to buy that house from him. But it's because of God's faithfulness and not from any other avenue. I couldn't have asked somebody for that amount of money. I couldn't have, pleaded with him to, just not, decide not to sell it. But God made a way, and I ended up buying my first house. I had to go to God in desperation because I had nowhere else to turn. So I want to leave you with this idea. When you get desperate, where do you turn? Are you desperate and vulnerable enough to throw yourself at the feet of Jesus? Or are you going to keep trying to solve your problem your own way?
Are you desperate and vulnerable enough to throw yourself at the feet of Jesus? Frank challenges us today with some tough but needed questions. Most of us can agree that we try to solve most of our issues on our own without asking for help from others. But that is not the way God wants us to live. We can run to Him with our issues and problems with confidence that we'll walk away with a solution. As Ron said at the beginning of the month, God is bigger than whatever is bothering us. His ways are bigger than ours. Why should we try and white knuckle our way through life, missing out on the joy and peace that God gives us when we are vulnerable with Him? I encourage you, Manu family, as we step into the new year, as we step into tomorrow, know that God is bigger and God is stronger, and God wants you to throw yourself and your problems at His feet, to let Him take care of you rather than trying to solve everything on your own. You are not alone. If you want someone to talk to or pray for you, please contact us at the email on the screen. We love getting to hear from you and serve you better. Come back next week and next year as we jump into 2022 and a new chapel message. See ya!